Good evening, it's Kaiser here, and this is Thursday Night Deck Building. Once more, we have a terrible idea for a deck, and let's see how this goes. Now, if you watched last week's episode, there we did a space mission only deck. We did 3 space missions, 3 copies of Construct Depot to end up on 140 points. So for this week, we'll try to one-up it a little bit. This time we are going for 180 points, but we're only going to complete 2 missions. Now, first of all, why would we do that? Why would we go for 180 points if 100 points are enough? Well, 100 points are only enough if you complete a mission in the Alpha Quadrant and if you complete a planet and space mission. In OTF, currently the rule is as follows. You need 100 points with a planet mission and a space mission. If you haven't completed a planet and a space, so if you're going all space missions or all planets, you need an additional 40 points. Also, if you haven't completed a mission in the Alpha Quadrant, you also need an additional 40 points. So if we play with planet missions only, as we do today, and we play in a quadrant that is not the Alpha Quadrant, then we need a whopping 180 points. But we can do this with only 2 missions. There's just one slight problem. There is still the intermix ratio rule in place saying that at any time when our bonus points are more than our mission points, then those excess bonus points don't count towards winning. So what this means is we need to score 90 points from missions and 90 bonus points. But we can do this. Let's have a look. So our basic setup here is we are playing with an alternate universe door in a Q's tent, and we are in the mirror quadrant. Our basis of operation is Mine Dilithium, and our mission of choice is Enlistment Drive. It's a universal mission. That means it can be stolen. So if we're playing against another mirror quadrant deck, well, we're screwed. Because they can easily steal some of our missions. Maybe they make life easier for us, but in general we will have a very hard time. So this is one of the elephants in the room that we need to point to quickly. Also, the way my missions were shuffled here was less than optimal. You want Mine Dilithium ideally somewhere in between your different enlistment drives, because you have to start from here, and your opponent will most likely seed better dilemmas closer to home and leave the weaker dilemmas, maybe their misseeds, their space dilemmas, far away. So if you have a mission shuffle that is slightly better, maybe you'd end up with Mine Dilithium at least here, maybe even right in the middle. That will give you a lot more options and makes dilemma seeding a bit more difficult for your opponent. But this is what we got, this is what we'll have to take here. So the basic infrastructure here is that of a regular Mirror Federation deck, meaning we are playing with our time location Halcyon Council as the main reporting engine. We have Protect the Timeline on it, that gives us a second free play, though it must be a unique personnel. And we also have a Terran outpost. We seed this a little bit away from Mine Dilithium, so we have a way to daisy chain a little bit from the Halcyon Council to the missions further away. We have Reunite Legends seated on the Terran outpost. We have Emblem of the Empire, which downloads the Art of Diplomacy. That's an important card, we'll come to that later. We have Assign Mission Specialists downloading Benjamin Maxwell and Inge to our outpost in the Mirror Quadrant. And we'll have Taking Charge and Crossover and Invitation. This one allows us to play Alpha Quadrant personnel, but only to report them, not download them, and also only once per turn. But once per turn we can bring in one of the regular universe guys to increase or to improve our skill matrix a little bit. When we see the Halcyon Council, we also get to download the ISS Enterprise, and we can then immediately download a Terran Empire personnel. We will go for Mr. Spock this time because he has skills that are useful and he also has the important equipment download that we will save for the moment. Okay, and as usual, we have Study Divergent History seated on the ISS Enterprise, meaning as soon as we have Mirror and Alpha Quadrant personnel, we can stop them for card draws. So 1 Alpha and 1 Mirror for 1 card draw, and you can do this twice. So stop 4 personnel for the turn, but get 2 card draws, a very efficient draw engine. Right, there are 2 more seed cards here. These are 2 dilemmas, 2 copies of Zarjenka, and also the Genesis device. So I'll quickly go over the point strategy here. We need to get to 180 points. We also need to have half of those points come from missions. So what we do is we complete 1 enlistment drive for the printed value of 30 points, earn the Genesis device here, place the Genesis device on the second copy of enlistment drive that we want to complete, announce that we are going to double the points. So this mission will then be worth 60 points, bringing us to 90. And the other remaining 90 points we'll have to find through some bonus points. But we can do that. And if you had a look at today's title, Redshirt Redemption, it's all about Ensign Davis. This nice Redshirt here has Treachery as his mission specialist skill, and that is very interesting here. Not because we want to use Treachery ×2, as we can see in the second part of the mission requirements here. Yes, we could do that, but we're after something different. We want to use Ensign Davis in combination with the Art of Diplomacy. This is something that I've seen done 1 or 2 times, and somebody recently on the TrekCC boards pointed out that yes, you can actually still score mission specialist points even if you use that skill not directly for the mission, but turn it into a different skill with the Art of Diplomacy first. So we are not using our Treachery guy to do the Treachery requirements, but rather we use not 2, but 4 of our Treachery Redshirts to contribute half a diplomacy each. The Art of Diplomacy says we can use 2 Treachery as if it were 1 diplomacy. So that's half a diplomacy, it's 1 diplomacy, 1.5, 2 diplomacy. So we can actually use 4 copies of our wonderful Mr. Redshirt here to provide 20 assigned mission specialist points per copy of enlistment drive. And then we will find other ways to get more points. If you don't believe that this works, I'll just point you to this passage here in the Almighty Glossary. If you look it up under Use Skills, you will find this last paragraph here, which reads, some cards allow your personnel to use a skill like this in place of another skill that they already have. And they specifically call out the Art of Diplomacy, which allows your personnel to use 2 Treachery as if it were 1 diplomacy. With this card, 2 personnel who have Treachery can provide 1 diplomacy. Each replaces the Treachery with Diplomacy ×1/2. On a mission specialist, it explicitly says this counts as using a specialist skill for assigned mission specialist. So there you have it. It's absolutely legal, though it's really a fringe case where you would ever use this. You could, in theory, use 10 copies of Ensign Davis or one of the Treachery Romulans to complete a mission like Wormhole Negotiations that I think requires 5 diplomacy with 10 diplomacy ×1/2 mission specialists here with the Art of Diplomacy, scoring 50 bonus points in addition to the printed 45. So that's really a wonderfully weird thing about first edition that you can do, and we'll just try to pull it off here. So that's the basic idea, using lots of little bonus point engines to grab our 180 points then. Right, let's just shuffle our deck and see what we get Let's draw starting 7 and play a typical turn. As you can see, lots of copies of Ensign Davis already appear in our opening hand, but we need personnel with good skills for dilemmas too, right? So we can play a unique personnel for free with Protect the Timeline. We can play a mirror personnel for free with Helcan Council. And we can also use our regular card play here to play Lieutenant Uhura. She's an alpha, but we have this once per turn exception and report alpha personnel as well. We would then beam them all aboard the ISS Enterprise. So let's just take this and also the draw engine. We relocate with Protect the Timeline, so we time travel. The ship is native, so it's not stopped. We can fly for 6 range to our outpost. We use Reunite Legends to download an original movies ship, the USS Enterprise A. We haven't downloaded anyone on this turn yet, so we immediately use this download of James T. Kirk. And then we'll beam all these guys over to the ISS, to the Enterprise A. Let's leave the ISS there for the moment. Let's fly back here. We will now flip Taking Charge. James T. Kirk is a captain, so we can use Taking Charge. We'll proceed to download an objective onto that mission. We will use Process or Mining. This one allows us to cycle through our deck and also score 1 bonus point each time we do it, as long as we have a geology there at the start of our turn and no facility there. So we simply do this at one of the missions where we don't have a facility, and we will then beam down our geology mission specialist to fuel that draw engine. The USS Enterprise A hasn't time traveled yet, so they will fly back and is stopped then because the ship is not native, but 3 personnel aboard the ship would be native. That would also help us to not stop the ship. And there we could end the turn. However, usually it's much better to leave personnel aboard the ISS Enterprise where we have the draw engine. So James T. Kirk from the Alpha Quadrant, Benjamin Maxwell, the mission specialist from the Alpha Quadrant, one of our Ensign Davis is from the Mirror Quadrant, and also First Officer Spock from the Mirror Quadrant. We'll leave them aboard the ISS for 2 draws. And then only these other guys would fly back if they could. We stopped James T. Kirk here. We could also have stopped Lieutenant Uhura from the Alpha Quadrant. That would still give us the icon to fly the USS Enterprise A. So that actually wouldn't work out for us if we still want to stop James T. Kirk. But that's really not the important point here. At the end of our turn, we just draw our regular card. And by now, we pretty much have all the tools in hand that we need. From now, we would simply play as many personnel as possible. Our priority lies on getting personnel that can beat the mission and leaving the guys that can score us points safe. So what do we need to maximize our points here? We need in total 4 copies of Ensign Davis. There's already 2. There's another one. We need Benjamin Maxwell as a mission specialist. We need Inge Eiger as a mission specialist. And we need James T. Kirk. That's the crew that we want to keep. Let's try and find one more Ensign Davis. Oh, the next one's hiding. If we don't find another Ensign Davis, we can play at the start of our turn Nanoprobe Resuscitation. What we would do is, at the beginning of the turn, we would voluntarily discard assigned mission specialists. Then play Nanoprobe Resuscitation to take the top card of your discard pile to hand. And then we would simply play Assign Mission Specialists as our regular card play. Then we could find an Ensign Davis. If we don't have one in play yet, you cannot use it to grab Mission Specialists that you already have in play. But if we don't have one yet, we could get one out. Otherwise, we would simply grab Mission Specialists that have skills that we don't have at the moment. For example, we could grab Alyssa with Medical. We could grab Leah Brahms with Engineer. We could grab a second Geology to draw more cards with Process or Mining, or there's also a Science in there. So that's simply to get more bodies into play. And as I said, that's our point scoring crew. We want to keep them safe. Inge is usually running Process or Mining until we actually want to complete missions. James T and Benjamin, as well as 2 copies of Ensign Davis, will usually run the Study Divergent History Draw Engine aboard the Enterprise, the ISS Enterprise. And most of the time I would send additional copies of Ensign Davis simply along and attempt the mission. Chances are, because he's a redshirt, he will die a few times. But as soon as we have 4 copies left, I think there are 10 copies in the deck right now, we are good. And then we can simply do this. If you are trying to keep track of points that we can score, you'll notice that even with these guys, it still wouldn't be enough. So in order to actually get to 180, what we have to do is, let's move this out of the way, at both of those missions that we want to complete, we would have to put 1 or 2 objectives with taking charge. So we cannot simply rush through those missions, but we need to make sure that we have certain objectives there. We will play additional copies of Process or Mining on those planet missions. What it does is it adds Geology to the requirements. The rest of this card, that you can score points and that you can cycle through your deck and that you can discard and so on, that's completely unimportant. We just care about the second sentence here, adds Geology to requirements, because that allows us to use Inge as a mission specialist, score 5 points here. If we do it at that mission as well, score 5 points there as well. It's a free download. It just costs the seed slot of taking charge, and we can put Process or Mining on any of our missions. We couldn't use the cycling game text several times, even though we had multiple copies out, but we really care just about this addition of Geology to the mission requirements. We want to make our mission harder here. So that is on the mission. So let's have a look how many points can we score right now. Enlistment drive here is a printed 30. So let's just do the count here. That's 30 points. The mission requires Geology, so we bring in Inge to do it. That's 5 points from Assign Mission Specialists. The mission requires Leadership. We do that with Benjamin Maxwell. So that's 10 points from AMS. The mission also requires Double Diplomacy. With the Art of Diplomacy, we have it on a Treachery guy times a half, times 1, times 1.5, times 2. So Assign Mission Specialists already scores us 30 points here. By the way, of course, the Art of Diplomacy only works if they actually have a hand weapon, but that's why we have First Officer Spock. If we haven't drawn a phaser, by the time we need to solve those missions, he will simply download a classic Type 2 phaser. So the guys are actually equipped with a hand weapon. Never discard the Art of Diplomacy to download a hand weapon, because, well, then the whole thing falls apart. So 30 points from Assign Mission Specialists. The mission then also requires a certain amount of integrity, which we easily have, even with lots of 3s. We have an 8 and a 9 in our mission specialists here. We have 9 on James T. Kirk that we downloaded. And then he uses his integrity, giving us another 5 points. So we are at 30 points from the printed value. James T. Kirk scores us 5. Inge and Maxwell score us 5. And 4 copies of Ensign Davis score us 5. So that brings us to 65 here. And before we do that, we will also run into Zarjenka, a self-seeded dilemma. Primitive alien begs for help. Ignore her, so we could just run through, but that's not what we want to do. We want to stop here to help her and earn bonus points for 5 points. So what this means is all the point scoring guys will usually be safe aboard the ship at a different mission, and all the other guys, all those workhorses, they will try and beat the opponent's dilemmas. Scotty and Chekhov and Uhura and McCoy and Kirk and all the others, they are here to beat those dilemmas, to work through. And once we've cleared all the opponent's dilemmas, we will then run into our self-seed, Zarjenka, at which point we will stop all these guys, score another 5 points, and then we would clean up the mission with our solving team. So Zarjenka is here to prevent us from accidentally solving the mission without all these point scoring guys and forcing us to do more missions. That would also work. I mean, completing a mission is always good, but we really want to get away with only doing 2 missions and not 3 or 4 or 5. And then, once we've done the first mission, we also earn the Genesis device. We are now sitting on 70 points. We can use this as an equipment card, and then if not playing Federation, we may place it atop a mission during our turn. But we are playing Federation, so what do? That's why we have several copies of I'm a Doctor Not a Bricklayer in here. Once per game downloads a geology personal to your medical and officer. So if we have medical and officer present somewhere, officer and medical, after a couple of turns you have those 2 skills. We'll download a geology there, and the geology personal of choice is, of course, David Marcus, because he has the special ability, you may use the Genesis device on your planet here. So this overrides the Genesis device's restriction that Federation players cannot usually use it. So that's our ticket to using the Genesis device. We place it on the second copy of enlistment drive and announce that we double the mission points here. So this will now be worth 60 points. And the rest is more or less what we did before. Before we complete the mission, we make sure that we have downloaded a process or mining there to give it geology. So let's just do the maths. We are at 70 points. The mission will be solved for double its printed value of 30, so 60 points. Brings us to 130. Then we have our mission specialists. Inge Eiger from the added geology, Benjamin Maxwell for the leadership, 1, 2, 3, 4 copies of Ensign Davis for the treachery/diplomacy, and James T. Kirk will use his 5 points because he contributes his integrity, and we have stopped one of our teams with another Zarjenka, so we are sitting at 170, so still 10 points short. Where do we get them from? Well, we need another turn to download another objective with taking charge. We'll put Fear will keep them in line. It plays on a Mirror Quadrant mission. And then we'll look at the last sentence. When you solve mission, score bonus points equal to your total weapons from staffed alternate universe Terran Empire ships at this mission, limit 15. So we simply need to fly in 2 of our ships, ideally, and then we can do this. Let's have a look. Where did we put the ISS Enterprise? I don't see it anymore. Over here. So we just need to have it staffed in orbit, but staffed for those Terran Empire ships means simply a personal with the icon aboard. So this is then worth 6 points for its 6 weapons. And by the time we complete our second mission, we usually also have a second ship in the form of one of the several copies of the ISS Constitution in play. So that would bring us to 11 bonus points. So we would be at 181. If we then have personnel like Mr. Scott or his Mirror Universe counterpart out, maybe we can find him somewhere in there. Yeah, there it is. They would boost the weapons or attributes of our ships even more. So in theory, with these 2 Scotties aboard the ISS, we are already at weapons 10. So with the Constitution, we are at 15. And remember that Process or Mining, the first copy that we downloaded that we used with Inge to process cards through our deck and simply help us dig for other cards, this also scores a point every turn. So by turn 5, that would already be 4 points, and then the ISS Enterprise would be enough to get us to 180, so the potential is there to go to about 200 points. So we can even rush through an Edo probe or get hit by a lack of preparation. So this is a deck that can absolutely work. However, there are several things that I'd see as glaring weaknesses. For example, if we play against another mirror quadrant deck that can simply steal a few of our missions, maybe even the ones where we have the Genesis device or the self-seeded dilemmas, then our point strategy simply falls apart, and it can become tricky to get to 180 then. That's definitely a problem, and there is no easy way to counter it. We could put in some protection to save our missions from being stolen, but that would cost several seat slots that would have to invest. You can of course do that. I didn't bother with that here. We could also add even more points. For example, we could have a Barclay's Protomorphosis disease after Zajenka, but then be careful, don't score more than 15 points from your own dilemmas, otherwise there is a card that makes you lose the game. The personal selection here is really just all about dilemma busting and making sure that we have several copies of Ensign Davis out. There are a couple of cards that help us. For example, Lena can dial a skill. But really, what's important here is just getting lots of bodies into play that you can attempt missions with and keep your point scoring guys safe. Don't ever risk James T. Kirk, don't ever risk Benjamin Maxwell. Inge, yes, she can be replaced with another geology mission specialist that we download from the tent, but really keep these guys out of harm's way. We are trying to make sure that we have the skills for the most commonly seen planet dilemmas. So Hannonian Land Eel, which requires security, science, and lots of strength. We should be prepared for that. We've got lots of copies of Ensign Davis. He's strength 7. We can download a gun, which we need anyway, so we have lots of 9s already. So that's a dilemma that we can handle. Same goes for Founder Secret, which requires huge attributes. God is another popular dilemma, requires high integrity guys. We could send our high integrity James T. Kirk and Benjamin Maxwell, but there are also enough other guys. Dr. McCoy is an 8, Captain Kirk is a 9, and always remember that we have Taking Charge, which gives all the guys at a mission that has an objective on it attributes +1. So even a 7, like Alyssa, would be enough to get the above 7 that we need to pass God. What else is annoying? Medical Crisis. We have Dr. McCoy that can outright nullify Medical Crisis. We have a Nurse Medical Biology that we can download as a mission specialist once we have an anaerobic resuscitation in hand. So there are ways. Probably one of the cards we need to mention here is what's it called? Loljiku. I don't know how to pronounce it. This one here. Unless anthropology in away team and transporter skill on your staff chip in orbit, 2 personnel of opponent's choice are killed. That's super powerful. If that hits, that can severely set you back. That's why when we're doing lots of planet missions, we want to make sure that we can pass this, which is also one of the reasons why we start with First Officer Spock. He has transporter skill, can stay aboard the ship, and then we should have a sufficient number of anthropology guys that come out. The Uhuras have anthropology. Captain Kirk has anthropology. Haddock has it. Dr. Boyce. There is also the Halkin representative here who has anthropology. So Malena is another one. So there are ways to be prepared against those dilemmas. Misinterpreted history with its archaeology and law, or exobiology and to leadership shouldn't be too much of a problem. We have a decent number of archaeology and exobiology in the deck, so that should work out. Rules of obedience, one of the most commonly played dilemmas, is one that will be hard to beat with the geology and to honor requirements, but with our 10 or so copies of Ensign Davis, we have enough security and treachery that we can beat that. So we don't have to worry too much about that one. So as far as planet dilemmas are concerned, we are quite well equipped. If our opponent is playing Buried Alive and playing their space dilemmas after the Buried Alive, we might be in for a bit of trouble, because several of the skills that are required by space dilemmas, like astrophysics and navigation, are a bit shorter in supply here, so those could be a bit problematic. Okay, so the deck currently sits at 14 seed cards, so that gives us 16 dilemmas. That's not ideal, but it should be enough to defend ourselves a little bit. And with all these universal missions, one card that we could look at is Pursuit Just Behind. It kills X personal random selection, where X is the number of opponents' universal planet missions with point boxes. So in our case, that's 5. So it's very similar to Denevan Neural Parasites in that it can simply kill a big number of personnel. However, unlike Denevan Neural Parasites, this one cannot be escaped with phasers. So it's 5 kills, and it doesn't say anything about preventing some of those kills. So that's a very good dilemma that we could run. It's also something that we could self-seed, funnily enough, because it says it kills X personal, where X is the number of opponents' universal planet missions with point boxes. So if we put that at one of our own missions, it would hurt our opponent if they want to steal that mission from us. But as long as our opponent hasn't seeded some of those missions themselves, we could simply walk through. I've never seen this done in a game. But it's a situation that could come up, and it would be a good laugh. Otherwise, just pick dilemmas that you think will do the trick. And this is certainly not the most competitive deck, but if you want to have some fun with all those red shirts being the stars here and getting to 180 points, maybe even 200 points by just doing 2 missions, that would be great. I'm very much looking forward to seeing somebody play this and let me know how it works. All right, that's all for today. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this at all, please leave a comment or subscribe to this channel. Until next time, expand your power in the universe. Bye-bye.